Okay, so we are live. Hi, everybody. I'm Annabel, and I'm here with Emily Katy today for a live Q&A about Girl Unmasked, Emily's book. So thank you all for joining us. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. So as you can see, you can comment any questions that you have, but we also have a new feature today where you can ask questions anonymously. Sorry, I can't say that word. But you can use Slido. There's a link in the comment section, there should be. So if you do want to ask Emily a question anonymously, feel free to do that and I can read that out. But if not, you can just put it in the comments as usual and I'll read that out too. But hi, welcome everyone. It's great to see you all. If you do want to share where you're coming from, who you are, introduce yourself, that would be great. I'm Annabel. I'm here in London from Listening Books. And then we're here with Emily too.
Yeah, I'm in St Albans in Hertfordshire.
Lovely. It's very hot in London, so I imagine it is too in St Albans.
Yeah, I took my dog on an early morning walk this morning because it's so hot and now I've got all the curtains closed.
Yeah, I might have to do that as well before long. It's very bright out there, and it's only 11, so I think it's only going to get hotter. But me and Emily, we've been having a little chat before the session, and we thought we'd start things off by putting like an icebreaker to you guys in the comments. We'd love to know what book you've read recently that you've enjoyed, or what you're currently reading. So if you do want to let us know in the comments what you're reading, that would be great. Emily, I'm wondering if you could kick us off with what you've been reading or what you've enjoyed.
Yeah, so I'm currently reading Lisa Jewell's new book. I don't know if there's any crime novels here, but Lisa Jewell is she writes a lot of thrillers and crime and stuff, but she's been asked by Marvel to write like a book. It's based on Jessica Jones. Now, I don't like Marvel, like I don't really know anything about Marvel in terms of like the films and stuff. But it's Lisa Jewell, so I was like, I'm gonna read it anyway. Because I went to an event recently, like where she was like doing her author stuff. And so I bought it and I'm enjoying it.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm the same. I do like thrillers, but I'm not really a Marvel girl. But maybe I'll give it a go because I like Lisa Jewell, so it sounds like that'll be up my street.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, Lisa Jewell book, I was like, I'm going to try it. And actually, like, you don't really need to know anything about Jessica Jones. Well, at the moment, I haven't needed to. And it's a bit like a detective kind of thing, but I feel like there's a touch of sci-fi coming in.
We've got loads of suggestions in the comments already. And hi to everyone who's introducing yourself. That's great. We've got Jonathan, who's just finishing Neuroqueer Heresies by Dr. Nick Walker. That sounds interesting. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that in the comments, Jonathan. It sounds great. You've also got Yellowface, of course. I love that book. I've also just finished it, Heather, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's probably the top book I've read so far in 2024.
I think I read it in about January, I think. Was it December? I can't remember. But yeah, amazing. 5 stars I gave it.
Yeah, I did too. And I also listened to it while I was running. I was starting running and it didn't go very well, but I was trying to like bribe myself into running by listening to an audiobook. And once I finished Yellowface, I kind of gave up. So I didn't have anything to run for anymore. But yeah, I really loved it.
I always listen to audiobooks while I'm walking, like walking the dog and getting ready in the morning. I think they're great.
Yeah, we have also if you have any audiobook recommendations in the chat, we'd love those too, as an audiobook charity. We've got Anne, who has recommended The Keeper of Stories by Sally Page. I haven't heard that one. Have you, Emily?
No.
Sounds great. I've heard of Sally Page. I think we've got a few of hers here at Listening Books, and I think our members are Sally Page fans. So thank you for the suggestion. Catriona has just read a book called The Spy Who Loved, a real-life spy who was working as a spy before SOE was set up. The way she was treated after the war was awful. Oh, that sounds interesting. A kind of historical fiction, maybe? I like a bit of that usually, but I tend to read more like Tudor period historical fiction. I don't know if that's just me, but that's like my era that I love.
Yeah, I'm not really into historical fiction. Anything, I don't know, but I've read some recently that have been set in the past that I've really, really enjoyed. So not really historical fiction, but like The Secret Life of, what's it called? The Secret Life of Addie LaRue. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, the most beautiful book. That was beautiful. But I did think, it's going to be set in the past. I don't know if I'm going to like it, and it's quite a long book as well. But absolutely loved it. It was beautiful. So I think maybe I need to read more books set in the past.
We've got Lawrence, who's coming from Tynemouth. Hi, Lawrence. And he started reading Emily's book towards the end of my recent holiday in Benicassim. So thank you.
I hope you had a nice holiday.
House has said that they're reading Beasts of Little Land by Juhia Kim. I'm sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly, but that sounds interesting too. Jonathan's explained the book that he mentioned. It's a look at the neurodiversity paradigm. Next book is yours, Emily.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I've not read that one that you're reading at the moment.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like one to note down. Catherine's, the last book they've read is Shuggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. That's been on my list for ages, and I feel like I really need to read it.
What's it about? I've not heard of it, I don't think.
I think it's about, I think it won the Booker Prize, was it, a few years ago? And it's about a boy growing up in Glasgow with lots of issues around in his life with family and things. I think it's quite a difficult read, but I think it's a good one. Victoria's just finished 34 Patients by Tom Templeton, which is a medical memoir about 34 standout cases that stayed with the author during his career. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Tick Russell has recently read Girl Unmasked, as both of their daughters have finally got their autism diagnosis at age 15 and 19. So that's great that you can read Emily's book to help understand it. And Tick's daughter is reading The Doomsday Machine, as her special interest is Oppenheimer since watching the film. Yeah, I definitely got very into the Oppenheimer lore after watching the film, so I might have to.
Yeah, I watched Barbie, but I didn't watch.
You were the half of Barbenheimer, was it? Yeah, I did watch both, but I do think Barbie might have been more my kind of film. Claire loves a bit of dystopia and is currently listening to The Sanctuary by Andrew Hunter Murray. I haven't heard of that one either. I'm getting loads of good recommendations.
I think I've heard of it, but I've not read it.
Lucy has just finished Moon Sister by Lucinda Riley. Sounds good. Moon Sister, that sounds like something I would enjoy as well.
I love accepting the books that we don't know by the titles.
I know.
Like, completely different.
I know, I'm awful at doing that. Like, I always say don't judge a book by its cover, but I definitely do judge it by the title, by the cover, by anything that I can. Jonathan would definitely recommend the book. It sparked him to write a compassionate letter to my best friend's son, who has recently received an autism diagnosis and feels negative about it. That's really nice to hear, Jonathan. And hopefully Girl Unmasked can help with that as well. And this Q&A session, if you have any questions for Emily. Yeah, we've got so many comments. I'm just trying to keep up with them all. We've got so many people in from different places. Netherlands, Jonathan's in, originally from Wales, same as me, Jonathan, although I'm not as in as nice of a place as the Netherlands. I'm just in London. Yorkshire, we've got people from, so far and wide really for this session. But thank you. We've just been talking about, for anyone who's joined, as we've been chatting about books that we've read recently that we've enjoyed, or what you're currently reading. So if you're a bit confused about why we keep talking about loads of books, that's what's going on. We've got Heather from Glasgow. Great.
I love hearing what everyone's reading. I love talking about what everyone's reading. It's great.
Yeah, me too. That's kind of where I get most of my recommendations from, hearing what other people, like my friends, are reading, or what I see online. because I can kind of trust that. Oh, Catherine's Shuggy Bane did win the 2020 Booker Prize. It's quite bleak at times, but a great book. Thank you, Catherine.
I might have to add it to my Goodreads. That's where I get most of my recommendations from. But my to be read list is like 200 books or something.
Really?
Trying to choose what to read next is always hard.
Yeah, it is. I recently read, for my contribution, Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I think Coco Mellors is the author. I really enjoyed it. I've heard some polarizing opinions, but I personally enjoyed it. It's kind of romantic, but also not romantic. They talk a lot about like mental illness as well, which is something that I really like reading. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that book. I think the chat might be quietening down a bit now. So maybe it's a good time to get started with the Q&A, if that's okay with everyone, and at you, Emily.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and thank you to the Virtual Village Hall for helping us to host this session. They run loads of great events, so definitely check them out if you enjoyed this. I'm Annabel Morgan. I'm here from Listening Books, and for anyone who is here who isn't familiar with what we do, we're an audiobook lending charity, so we provide audiobook access for anyone who has a disability, illness, mental illness, or learning difficulty that affects your ability to read or hold a book. And this includes autism, ADHD, OCD, a lot of things that we might be talking about today. So if you're in the audience and think we could help, please do check us out. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk to Emily all about her amazing memoir, Girl Unmasked. Thank you so much, Emily, for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I think your charity's amazing.
So yeah, thank you.
Really to be here.
Thank you. I will give a quick introduction just to kick us off for anyone in the chat. I'm sure everyone knows who Emily is, but just in case people don't. So Emily Katy is an autistic blogger, mental health advocate, and trustee of the Autistic Girls Network. She runs a blog which provides lots of helpful support and advice for mental health, neurodiversity, lots of different things that you should definitely check out. And at the age of just 22, Emily became a Sunday Times best-selling author for her memoir, Girl Unmasked, How Uncovering My Autism Saved My Life, which is what we're here to talk about today. So thanks again, Emily. We're really excited to learn more about the book and your experience.
Oh, thank you. Did you want me to talk a little bit about what the book was about first?
Yeah, maybe for anyone in the chat who hasn't read or listened to the book yet, it would be great to have a little overview while people are sending their questions in. That would be great. Thanks, Emily.
Okay, well, this is the book. I love the cover. I think that the cover artist, honestly, is just amazing. So, I wrote the book when I was, I think I started writing it when I was about 19 or 20. It's a very long process writing a book. Well, not necessarily even the writing part, but the whole kind of editing part, the publishing part. But yeah, effectively, it's the story of my life from the age of 8 to 18, and kind of growing up undiagnosed autistic and undiagnosed ADHD, but the book focuses on autism. And kind of not knowing that about yourself, and how that led to my anxiety getting really bad and developing into OCD and depression. And then I ended up in a children's mental health unit when I was 16. And even there, they didn't recognize my autism. And then it was just sort of my journey of finding out that I was autistic and how that kind of led me to where I am now. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great book. We've got a question already, which is amazing. Is there a link to where we can listen to the book? If you're a Listening Books member, you can listen to it through our website or Libby, but I'm sure it'll be accessible through your local library, any kind of audiobook streaming platform. And I definitely recommend it. I listened to the audiobook. So yeah, I
love hearing people say they listen to the audiobook, because recording the audiobook, so I recorded it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's so hard. Like, you have to sit there for like 3 or 4 days just reading the book aloud. And especially as someone with ADHD, like that was just so hard. But I feel, I love the fact that people listen to it. It's also a bit strange because I'm like, people are listening to my voice, like reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Audible, Spotify, like, and anywhere where you get your audiobooks from.
Yeah, as I said, I listened to the audiobook and I really liked how you narrated it rather than had a narrator. But obviously, you did talk about some quite difficult times in your life throughout the book. So was that challenging, like having to read that out, read it all through for the audiobook?
Yeah, it was. It was challenging. I mean, I sort of practiced it beforehand with my dad, actually. We sat in my room and I read it aloud like every night for like 3 or 4 weeks until we got through it. So I'd sort of gone through it once. But yeah, it was challenging at times. I was so lucky though that the audio producer who did it with me, his name was Andrew Chapman, and he was amazing. We had a lot of fun. Like, we had a lot of laughs, and we could just take breaks whenever we needed to. So yeah, it was all right. And I think I've sort of got to the point where I'm used to talking about it now, and I feel a bit more detached from that time of my life as well. So it doesn't feel like I'm reliving it every time I talk about it anymore. I feel kind of more detached from it. So it's got easier for sure.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about what made you decide to write Girl Unmasked, your memoir.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that I was angry, and it was that anger that sort of made me want to write. I've always loved writing. Ever since I was little, I would write like stories and books and diaries and stuff. And when I was in the inpatient unit, I kept a diary as well, a very, very in-depth, detailed diary. So writing's just always been how I process things and something I've loved to do. And I already had my blog at the time as well, and was starting to gain some followers on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. So it just sort of felt, it just sort of happened. I was angry about what I had been through and how I felt. I guess at the time, I felt like I'd been failed, and I felt like mental health professionals hadn't understood me and had made things worse at times. Though there were also some professionals that helped me massively. So yeah, I was angry about what I'd been through. But then as I kind of got more into the autistic community online, and I became a trustee for the Autistic Girls Network, and through my mental health nursing training, I realized that like my story was just like one out of hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, that were so similar. There are so many autistic people in mental health units who aren't diagnosed, or who are diagnosed but actually they're in a place that isn't really helping them very much, contributing to trauma. And I just think it's so sad that actually autistic people end up so distressed and struggling before they recognize that they're autistic, or just as a consequence of kind of things that they've gone through in their life. So yeah, that made me even angrier when I realized that I was like so many others were going through the same thing. And actually, out of the young people in the unit that I was in at the time, like I think like 60% of them, of the young people that were there when I was there, have now kind of been diagnosed with autism too. So these units are filled with autistic people, especially I think CAMS units are just filled with autistic young people, and that made me angry. And I felt like there were so many signs that I was autistic. Not so much when I was younger. I think when I was younger, I was a very happy child, and I was a very high achiever, and I was a conformer and a masker. If people had understood autism, well, it obviously could have been picked up. But as a teenager, like, it was so obvious. I was running away from school. I was rocking under tables. I had to be taken off site when there were fire alarms. I couldn't cope with noise. I had panic attacks all of the time about things like change and noise and stuff. Like, it was just so obvious, and yet nobody ever suggested it. So I just wanted people to be more aware of it, and how it might present in some young people. Obviously everyone is different, and this is just my story, but I know that from other young autistic people that actually there were a lot of us presenting similarly as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not being recognised.
Yeah, I definitely think that your book, will hopefully contribute to that change of people knowing the kind of the way autism can present, and that it's not necessarily the stereotype that people think of, and just being able to support people through that. So thank you for giving us that information. We do have a few questions coming through. So Rosanna's asked, are questions public and available to view after the event, or private within the event chat? So I can answer that. They will be able to be viewed after the event, but we also do have the option today to submit questions anonymously. That's through Slido. You can click on a link in the comments and submit any questions anonymously if you do want to do that. I really can't say the word anonymously today, but I hope that helps, Rosanna. We've got a question from Jonathan, who's asked, Emily, has the writing of the book helped form that healthy detachment from the difficulties in your personal story?
Yes, I think so. I don't know if it was the writing of it or if it was just time and it would have happened anyway. But when I first started writing it, I was quite emotional writing it, and like those feelings of anger and emotions were very intense. But you have to go through so many rounds of edits that eventually I was just like, yeah, I'm so over this. And actually it wasn't affecting me so much in the same way personally. But also I was getting older, and years when I first started writing it, I was probably like three years out of that journey, out of that kind of cycle of crisis, whereas now it's been like, well, I'm nearly 23, so, and I would say that from about the age of 18 I started to settle a little bit better. So I don't know if it would have happened with time anyway, but yeah, writing it did help. It was quite cathartic, I suppose, the whole process. I found it hard at first, like letting the book then go to your editor, and then obviously they read it and they come back with comments and things, and we'd have some back and forth conversations where they would think that certain parts of it weren't necessary, and I would say it is necessary to include that. That was part of my journey and I need that in there. So it felt weird to have someone like unpicking how you like sort of wrote about things that happened to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were very lovely and kind of accommodating the whole way through. And so yeah, I would say it probably did help. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it always helps to write, in my experience anyway, to write things down. Like otherwise you have so much bubbling in your head that when you kind of write it down, you can articulate it better and really understand how you're feeling. So yeah, I definitely think writing would help, but that's with me. We've got lots of comments. Hannah has said that she really identifies with that feeling of being failed and such a feeling of injustice. Sorry to hear that, Hannah, but I'm really glad that you can relate to Emily in the book. Lucy's commented that your story is inspiring. I was an inpatient for 18 months after years not accepting my autism. I was having very depressive moods and hurting myself. I was also diagnosed at 14 and also masked. Yeah, I think masking is definitely a common theme, and obviously in the book is Girl Unmasked. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us a bit about masking and the unmasking process.
Yeah, and I think this is such a personal journey for everyone, like understanding how they might have masked and unmasking as well. Obviously, the effects of masking on your mental health, we know, are not good. The research shows that masking can increase mental health difficulties, depression, suicidal ideation in autistic people. However, I do also recognise that being able to mask has allowed me to do things that I don't think I'd be able to do if I couldn't mask. So it's kind of a catch-22, and that actually there are some situations where I'm grateful that I can mask because it helps me get through certain situations better than if I couldn't. So masking is essentially suppressing those autistic behaviours. I think of it as copying kind of neurotypical people around you, and yeah, kind of learning how to act and how to socialize in a way that is more socially accepted, perhaps. Just to explain what masking is for anyone that doesn't know, it might be things like suppressing stims, kind of learning social scripts and how to respond in certain situations. So yeah. Obviously a lot of us grow up masking without realizing that we are masking. Not every autistic person can mask, but for those of us that do, it can be really, really exhausting. And although it might help us navigate some situations that we might otherwise not be able to, actually when you do find out that you're autistic and you sort of try to look at your life and determine where you're masking and where you're not masking, it's really, really confusing. And you start to kind of question, well, I started to question, like, what's actually me and what is me masking? And does it matter if I'm masking? How much of me masking is contributing to kind of the meltdowns and the exhaustion? And actually, what would my life be like if I couldn't mask? So I'm a mental health nurse. So at work, I do mask, and actually to some level everybody puts on a mask at work, but for autistic people it's just that next level of kind of suppressing that autism a little bit, where you can, if you can, and I do think that it allows me to do my job more than if I didn't mask, but obviously that comes with those consequences. So it's confusing, and it's a personal journey for everyone, because obviously everyone is different in how much they, if they mask and how much they mask and what that impact is on their life. But it can definitely be that kind of confusing, what is me and what is masking, and is that okay or is that not okay? Like, it can just be really confusing when you especially when you first find out that you're autistic.
Yeah, I think it's really important that more people know about masking and unmasking as well, because it helps to understand how autistic people might be exhausted, as you say, through, it's like another level of life you have to deal with that most people don't know about. So I think it's really good to be aware of that, and it would definitely help with understanding. We've got a question here from Claire, who is a self-diagnosed as neurodiverse and has been through a long journey of mental and physical health issues, but also a high achiever and have reached a point where they have a good balance in their life. So they're wondering if there's really any benefit of chasing a formal diagnosis, as I feel I won't be listened to and it may do more harm than good, as they are triggered by medical settings. So do you think, Emily, that it is beneficial to get a formal diagnosis?
Again, it's so different for everyone, and no one can tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Self-diagnosis and self-identifying as neurodivergent is so valid. We know that actually seeking a diagnosis, seeking an assessment, and having an assessment is actually a privilege in some cases, because it can be so hard to access. And like you said, you have kind of that trauma around medical settings. So it might be really hard for you to access that because of that reason. So I think it depends, because obviously that self-identification is valid. And if you believe that, and you don't feel that you need the confirmation of a medical professional, then that's fine. You don't necessarily need to. But obviously for some people who might be unsure, and actually feel that they need that diagnosis to share with other people, so that other people might believe them more, if they need adjustments at work, which, although adjustments and things like that should be needs led, it shouldn't be led by a diagnosis, same as at school. We know that often having that diagnosis can just be helpful, can't it, in advocating for your needs. Then you might choose to seek that formal assessment. But really, it's so dependent on you and your circumstances. The one thing I would say is that if it's because you feel you won't be listened to, I mean, I personally, that reasoning to me, like, it's not fair on you if that is the reason that you're not wanting to seek that assessment, because you feel you won't be listened to. Actually, if you want an assessment, you deserve to be listened to, and you deserve to have, like, the care that you deserve. So it's looking at actually what is the reasons why you don't want that formal assessment, and what you think the benefits would be in your life. If actually your life is at the point where things are okay, your needs, you manage your needs, you self-identify as, you self-diagnose as neurodivergent, we know that's valid. You can still engage in those kind of communities. It's weighing up. There's no right or wrong answer, really. So individual.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And we've got lots of support in the chat as well, which is so heartwarming to see. We've got a question from the Sherlock. Is it planned to translate Emily's book into German?
I don't think there's any imminent plans, but we don't know. The paperback comes out next year, and I don't have a US publication deal yet, but that's also in the works. So yeah, it sort of depends, I think, on the reception to it, and I don't know.
Well, fingers crossed. We've got a question from Millie, who is a fellow mental health nurse. And Millie wants to ask about sensory issues and organisation issues, as that they have ADHD and waiting for an ASC assessment. How do you manage your work with your ASC and ADHD?
Hi, Millie. Lovely. Yes, I always think it's so lovely to meet other kind of mental health nurses who are also neurodivergent, because it's not easy. I am very, very lucky that because I work with neurodivergent children, and so a lot of my colleagues, well, actually all of my colleagues are very understanding, and a lot of them are neurodivergent themselves. So working in that kind of environment where I can be open about my diagnoses and about kind of my difficulties has just been amazing. And I do think that having that support network at work, so those colleagues that understand, is so important. We know that sometimes you might be in an environment where you feel unsupported and you feel people don't understand, and that can be so tricky. In terms of managing like the work in general, so I had ADHD coaching last year with Leanne Maskell ADHD Works. It's a kind of organization that does coaching, and I got that funded through Access to Work. So Access to Work is a government scheme that provides support for people with disabilities to either get long-term disabilities, long-term health conditions, that sort of thing, to get into work and to stay in work. Now, depending on the size of the organisation, depends on whether the organisation has to contribute. But with coaching, they fund all of coaching. So, for example, the equipment and things, you would probably want to go through work if you needed that sort of stuff, because they get it from different places. But the Access to Work funding for coaching, I found that so helpful. Just things like, I don't know whether you work shifts or whether you're in the community teams, but actually my team's calendar is all color coded now. I block out time to focus. I block out kind of time to do certain tasks, and literally just like little things like that has been so helpful. I only work in the office 2 days a week, and I work from home 2 days a week. Sometimes I go in 3 days, depending on what's needed. But that helps me to manage my kind of tiredness and that sensory stuff. I use loop earplugs in the office. I absolutely love them, because the sound of the printer drives me like I cannot deal with the sound of the printer. I find that really difficult. Apparently there's nothing they can do about the printer noise, but they did swap the clocks to non-ticking clocks, and I didn't even realize that they did that because I didn't like the ticking noise. So when I found that out, I was like I was very touched by that. So it's like those little changes, but definitely having that support at work is really helpful. I don't know what trust you work for, but the trust I work for has kind of a neurodivergent like group, so that's helpful too, because you can kind of liaise with other people in the trust who are neurodivergent. But yeah, it's not easy, but I hope that you work in an environment that's supportive, and I hope you enjoy your job, because it's really rewarding as well.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I think it's really important from that to know to advocate for yourself. Like, you're not a pain, you're not being a burden. Like, you have needs, and just go ahead and say them, because it's you who's working there, and everyone just wants to support you, ideally. So yeah, thank you. We've got a question from Tick, whose youngest daughter was able to mask at school, but would go into a meltdown when she got home as masking was exhausting. But their eldest is not able to mask as well. Unfortunately, the school dismissing her as she was a well-behaved high achiever, which has caused so many problems, including self-harm, BPD, ADHD regression, and more. Do you have any advice where we could go for help, as she has been dismissed by GP and counselling at university have said they can't help?
First of all, I'm really sorry that that's the situation. That's horrible for your eldest, but also for all of you having to watch that as well. So is she at university? If she is at university, she could look at disabled student allowance, which gives the university funding, and it can provide a mentor. So I had and you can get like a study mentor and a more of a mental health mentor. So I don't know if she's got any sort of diagnoses or even just like records from the GP, but that's amazing. You know, they can provide those weekly mentors. Through uni. In terms of being dismissed by the GP, sometimes you have to keep on at them and you have to ask to see a different GP, and you don't take no for an answer. If she is really, really struggling, you don't take no for an answer. You ask for a referral to the mental health team, so she can have an assessment with the mental health service. There also might be, so in different kind of counties and areas and towns and stuff, there are like Mind groups. So Mind is the mental health charity. They have they have sort of like groups throughout the week. There are kind of like crisis houses, or like crisis, like, as in like crisis, like cafes, like things like that, where they can help you link up with support as well. So it's really worth looking at what's in your local area. Google's helpful, but also local Facebook groups. I always recommend asking on local Facebook groups for support that's in the area. Peer support, I think, is really, really valuable. So being able to meet other young people or kind of adults who are struggling as well can just help you feel like you're a bit less alone. But yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. I know it's just not easy, is it, having to advocate for yourself or your child in that case, when sometimes you're just met with barriers at kind of everywhere you turn.
A Tix replied to your question. Yes, she has a diagnosis. She receives DSA, but mentoring was not on it. She has only just received her diagnosis.
Okay. I don't know how exactly you get that reviewed, like the DSA, because mentoring is really quite common through DSA. So I don't know if that has to go through like the support services, but they like link up with DSA, whoever does those assessments. And they're normally really, well, at least my experience and kind of the experience in my area is that they're actually quite like, they want to give you like the support. They're not like tight on money or whatever, like you know, like sometimes it feels like they really want to give that support. So I don't know how you get that reviewed, but mentoring through DSA is brilliant, and that is there. So that's really worth looking into. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. We've got a question from Hazel, which I can answer. You will be able to rewatch this afterwards. The full video will be available on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. X, sorry. But yeah, the whole thing will be able to watch. Tix, thank you, Emily, for all of your advice, and they'll definitely follow up. We've been getting some great recommendations for books and audiobooks in the chat, which is amazing. It's so nice to see people getting involved. So thank you, Jonathan. Emily, I know you talk in the book a lot about how books have helped you, reading, escaping into your imagination. So could you talk a bit more about that, about how reading or listening or writing, whatever, can help you with your autism and other things?
Yeah, I was that child that would sit at like the edge of the playground or parties reading a book. I would read like novel every single day in the summer holidays, and probably, you know, sometimes even more than one. I would just sit and read nonstop, which actually, you know, for a child with ADHD, it was my brain that was always busy. And because I loved reading, I could hyper focus on the books, and I loved being in those imaginary worlds, and kind of I love the whole process of like storytelling and how authors would write their stories as well. So it's always been kind of a special interest of mine. Though actually, when I became a teenager, I did lose that for quite a while, and I think it was my anxiety. So I would struggle to read because my anxiety, like, it wouldn't distract me enough to kind of distract that anxiety at the time. But I got back into reading probably about a year ago now, and I've read, like, including audiobooks, I've read like 80 books this year so far.
Wow.
So I love books. And that's not going to be the case for everyone. I guess, you know, what everyone has their own kind of interests and their own special interests, but being able to harness those and add them into your life and your day, I feel like makes life a lot more manageable. Those special interests, kind of like those escapes. I like to think of it as kind of an inbuilt coping mechanism in your brain, autistic people's brain, is that those special interests, because you can focus on them for that escape. They provide enjoyment, kind of relaxation, something else to think about and focus on other than like everything that's happened in your day. But yeah, for me, that was always books. I don't really know what else to say about that.
Yeah, no, completely agree with everything you said, and I'm sure loads of our members will too. We have a lot of research that shows that audiobooks can really help with anxiety and stress because it's having a voice, kind of like almost like a companion talking to you, and being able to listen to something else really can help distract more than having to focus on the page.
Yeah, and you know what? So I got into audiobooks last year when I got back into reading. So out of those 80 books, probably about 30 of them are audiobooks that I've read that I've listened to this year. And I, every morning when I get up, I put on an audiobook, and I find that it really helps me like not procrastinate, and actually move from task to task, because I think my brain is kept busy by listening to the book. Obviously having ADHD, I think I need that like level of stimulation to help me focus on tasks. It means I get less distracted. It means I actually like move from task to task, and it seems like less effort, because I'm sort of doing those things mindlessly rather than like having to think about each task. I like walking more because my brain is kept busier, whereas otherwise walking can just be a bit dull. In the car as well, it helps me focus when I'm driving, having that audiobook on. So yeah, they're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. We do have a few more questions. Amy's asked, did you enjoy narrating the audiobook, and was it challenging to narrate at all?
Did I enjoy it? Yes, it was a very fun process. So I said at the beginning that the audiobook producer that I worked with was great. We had a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. I've got some clips on my Instagram of like bloopers of me doing the audiobook because it was hard to focus at times. It was challenging to narrate the harder bits, but that's where we had kind of lots of breaks, and he just made the process so much easier. And to be honest, I think that like when you're doing things, like the people that you're working with, so whether it's in work, like whether it's like like I don't know, but it's the people that you work with that can help to make things easier. And so finding those people that can understand you better and can work with your brain just makes things easier. So I was grateful that helped the process.
Yeah, great. We've got Jonathan's commented that they've heard this called as spins as a positive way of talking about special interests such as reading, and Jonathan loves that way of talking about interests that we love. Yeah, that does sound really nice. And I just wanted to mention that our catalogue at Listening Books is member-led, so if you do join and you want books that would kind of help with your special interest, help you to enjoy these things, just let us know, and we can try and get any books that you have requests for. We have another question from someone who is not diagnosed but has autistic traits like very high masking and have ended up in autistic burnout. Do you have any resources for tips to stop masking moving forward?
I think it's difficult because I don't think that personally, I don't think that the aim should be to stop masking at all. I don't think that that's necessarily possible. It's hard for us to work out when we're masking, when we're not masking. But what I'm wondering is whether I think that burnout can come from those situations where more of that masking is required. So what are those situations that you're realizing you're masking more in and are really exhausted in? So are they kind of social arrangements? Is it work? Is it, I don't know, what are those kind of individual situations, and can they be lessened at all? So I don't know whether those social stuff, can you kind of cut down on how much of that you're doing? I find that kind of scheduling in time to rest and recover, and scheduling in time like to read and like with my kind of engage in my special interest, I find those things really helpful. So I think it's looking at your week and going, okay, what are the parts where I am most exhausted, and where can I schedule in that time that I need? In stopping masking as well. So I don't know whether are there certain people as well that actually you find harder to be around because maybe you really feel like you can't be yourself around them? That's obviously going to be more exhausting because you might be double kind of like going over and over in your head, like whether what you've said is okay, whether you're kind of acting right in that situation. So maybe it's also looking at kind of who's in your life and actually who makes you happy, and can you kind of increase time with them and decrease time with other people as well. But I would also say just try not to be too hard on yourself. Like it might not be possible to kind of just stop masking, and actually there's a lot of autistic people online that talk about how like stopping masking has actually been really, really hard for them, because then they've not been able to do kind of things that they wanted to do before. So it's sort of a balance of looking at what makes you exhausted and what like doesn't make you exhausted and can kind of help build your energy a little bit more. And then sometimes, you know, you might end up in burnout, but are there kind of weeks you can have like annual leave if you're working, or just weeks where you can literally do nothing, because sometimes we need time where there are no demands on us and less sensory kind of stimulation and less overwhelm, just to recover a little bit. Don't feel like you have to fill like your kind of annual leave days or your like weekends with things to make the most of it. Actually, sometimes we need to like do nothing. But yeah, I hope that's helpful a little bit. Just don't be hard on yourself.
Thank you, Emily. Paz has asked, what's next? Will you write more, perhaps fiction?
Yes, I would love to write fiction. That's always what I've loved writing, before obviously writing Girl Unmasked. I've always loved to write like stories as a kid. I'm currently writing a fiction book, a young adult fiction book, so aimed at teenagers. I don't know whether anything will happen with it. I haven't let anyone read it. My agent doesn't even really know that I'm writing it. Well, I think she does. Follows me on social media and she likes the post, but like we've not actually discussed it. So I was like, look, just leave me be for a bit. But I've got sort of 45,000 words of that. It will probably need a couple of rewrites, and then we'll see where we're at. Might just get shoved under the bed. I don't know why I even say that, shoved under the bed, because it's like on my laptop now. It's not even like, but I used to write on paper that I would shove under my bed. But yeah, I would love to write fiction for teenagers. And we will see.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. Do you think that your potential fiction work, would it be important to you to kind of have representation, characters with autism and other like mental illnesses or different disabilities? Is that something that you think you'll include in your writing?
So the main character of the book I'm writing is autistic. The thing is, as an autistic person, I do find it hard to know what it's like not being autistic. And although I've read so many books, like you read so many books, like where characters aren't autistic, or you know they're not kind of written to be autistic, I still find it hard, like actually writing a character that isn't autistic, because you kind of use your own thoughts and your own kind of interpretation of things sometimes to put into a character a little bit. This character is very different to me though. Like she's not me. We are very different, but even still, like having a character not be autistic, I mean, I'm sure I'll do it one day, but for now, when I used to go to all these kind of writing events when I was younger, they would always say, like, as their writing advice, like, write what you know. So for now, I'm just going to stick to that. I know what it's like to be autistic. So yeah, there will be autistic characters.
On that note, do you have any recommendations for books that have autistic representation or helpful books for understanding autism that you can let our audience know about?
Yes. Yes. Right. So in terms of like non-fiction books, I'm currently reading this. I have like read like bits of it before, but not like properly in order. It's called Untypical by Pete Warmby. In terms of like fiction books for any children, I absolutely love Elle McNichol. So if you've got like a child, or like I'd say up to sort of about the age of 12, but you know, they might even like this if they're older. I like it. Like, and there's a lot of autistic adults that like reading these. Elle McNichol has written like some amazing books about autistic characters, but also other neurodivergent characters and things. This one's called A Kind of Spark, and it was made into a kids TV show on CBBC, which is, oh, it's so brilliant. Obviously it's like a kid show, so you watch it and you're like, oh, sometimes you're a bit like, okay, that's like like this is aimed at kids, but then at the same time it's so lovely to see that sort of thing exists now. So that's, any of her books are brilliant for children. other ones for adults. You know when your mind just goes a bit blank?
Yeah. Don't worry. And if anyone in the chat also has any recommendations, please let us know.
I think someone else mentioned this in the chat, Unmasking Autism, further up. So this is really good. Dr. Devon Price. The power of embracing our hidden neurodiversity. So if you were interested in masking, that might be good, because this one is very much like about masking. I do have a page on my website, like a resources page, and there's like books, and it's listed in kind of like children, young adult, teenagers, adults, with like fiction and non-fiction. So you might like to look at that. And there's also a list in Girl Unmasked as well of like recommended books.
Yeah, I love the lists in Girl Unmasked. They're amazing. They're so helpful to just have everything in a list. Why don't people make more lists?
I love lists.
Jonathan's got another great recommendation for a video essay on YouTube. So these are all in the chat if anyone wants to go and look at these after. We do have about like just under 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any more questions for Emily, please do get them in. You can either do that in the comments or through the link for the anonymous chat, the anonymous question button. So yeah, please get those in while you can. Pete Whalen, by book I've read and recommend too. That's from Lucy. Warmby, Pete Warmby.
Yeah,
thank you. Oh yeah. I'm wondering if there are obviously a lot of people in the audience who are here because they want to understand autism and learn how to support their loved ones and people in their life with autism. So I'm wondering if you could talk about any ways that family members or friends can support the people in their life who have autism.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is like recognizing that individual's needs. So everyone is going to be different, but sometimes just asking them, like, what do you find hard? Like, even children can often tell you, like, what do you find hard about your day? And then kind of looking at those situations and going, is there anything that I can do to help you? If, you know, there are children and young people having a lot of meltdowns, what are the triggers leading up to that, and is there anything that can be done to kind of intervene to lower that distress and those demands that might be kind of contributing to that earlier. We know that sensory overwhelm and sensory distress is obviously a major thing. Can the environments be adapted in any way? Like sometimes even home, like the home can be quite overstimulating. So if you have like multiple TVs on in different rooms, you know, you might have the fridge might be buzzing, there might be kind of a fan on, there might be like music on, and sometimes that can just be really hard to come into after a busy day. So are there any ways that those things can kind of like be lessened a little bit? Some of the strategies that I find really helpful, my weighted blanket is like an absolute godsend. I get under my weighted blanket, like sometimes even if I'm working from home, sometimes on my lunch break, like I will just go under my weighted blanket for like 10 minutes. And again, that's going to depend on like the individual sensory needs, because for me that like feeling of like heavy like pressure I find really kind of like grounding. Loop earplugs are really helpful. Visual schedules, so being able to see like what you're doing in your day laid out rather than just kind of being told, because it's hard to process that information like just by hearing it sometimes, especially if it's like a child or a young person. Having those like wall planners where they can see what they're doing every day might help to alleviate some of the stress, like moving between each step. I think the recognition as well, though, that actually going from one task to another can be really challenging, because it's a change, it's that adjustment, and it's often those periods of change and adjustment that can be really tricky. Getting started on tasks can be hard, but once you're started on them, it might be easier. That's why I find listening to audiobooks helpful, because it sort of like bridges that gap a little bit, and I'm not thinking about it as much. Sometimes people find music really helpful as well, although it might contribute to sensory overwhelm. Sometimes for some people they find that calming, and you know, you might get, there are some autistic teenagers who like listening to that really loud like rock music, and again, it's because everyone's sensory profile is different. Sometimes they'll be sensory seeking, and sometimes they'll be kind of sensitive to different sensory things, and that's why looking at their needs are really important. But at the end of the day, just kind of being open to learn, being understanding and kind, and asking them what you can do. It's not going to be perfect. You're not always going to be able to like solve everything. But just having that safe person there that they know they can go to if they need to is going to make so much difference.
Yeah, thank you. And I would also add to that to read Emily's book, because I think that would be a great way to learn how to support and understand your loved ones with autism. Jonathan's got one last question. Have you had any conversations with family about history for autism in the family? Jonathan is the only one who is autistic in the family. But yeah.
So we know it's genetic, right? And obviously, like going back years and years, it wasn't diagnosed. So we definitely recognize traits in family members, so kind of grandparents. Neither of my parents think that they're autistic. Yeah, debatable whether they are. Yeah, so neither of them think they're autistic, but one of my siblings was diagnosed after me. So it's definitely been a conversation that's been had kind of more. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be hard as well, because if you're diagnosed first and then you recognize that you think someone else is autistic, having those conversations can be tricky, because sometimes people are very like upset by that idea. So it's sort of respecting that as well, and just sometimes you can recognize the needs that they might have without having to put the diagnosis on it. Although for obviously a lot of us, like for me, knowing that I'm autistic helped me so much. For some people, maybe they just don't want to know, but actually they might still recognize that they're sensitive to noise, and actually loop earplugs might help them. Or they might recognize that they find social situations difficult, and actually giving themselves permission to leave at 9 o'clock at night instead of having to stay till midnight might be helpful. So yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? I feel like sometimes one person gets diagnosed and it's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, Jonathan's added that it's up to 90% genetic, and they've heard about stories of their aunts and difficulties they had. But yeah, that's really true, that obviously even just a few years ago it wouldn't have been diagnosed. So even if someone hasn't been diagnosed in your family, it could very well be there. We've got a comment from Claire who said, I wish someone had helped me recognize how important STEMs were, because they are mocked for so many things, and they now work with a lot of neurodiverse students and encourage their STEMs. Do you have anything to add to that, Emily, like about stimming and kind of how you can respond to that? Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, stimming is self-regulatory behavior, so it's any kind of repetitive movement, and actually neurotypical people do it as well. Non-autistic people do it as well at times. It's just not kind of, maybe they don't recognize it, and it maybe not as frequent and to the same level, but literally kind of like twirling your hair over and over, that can be a stim, because it's that repetitive movement. So if you're doing it because it's soothing and because it helps you, like that is, that's classed as stimming. My leg is often going up and down. I like fidget toys. I like kind of twisting things. I like jumping up and down, like things like that. Obviously there are stims that kind of, there are stims that can be harmful. So especially kind of in young autistic children, they might be stimming in a way that's hurting themselves. And it's redirecting that into kind of something else that might give them the same sort of feeling. So if they're kind of headbanging, is it that they can like, is it that they're needing that kind of whole body movement? Do they need like a trampoline to jump up and down on? Do they need to spin? Do they need to like it? How else can you get that need met in a way that isn't going to be harmful to them? Because sometimes stimming can be a way of expressing distress as well, and kind of overwhelm. And sometimes it can be that kind of soothing, expressing happiness and joy. But yeah, having that environment where people feel free to stim is great, because it might help them to concentrate better. It might help them to, not feel so overwhelmed. Yeah, I'm lucky because at work, like in the office, I just kind of am me, and I feel grateful that everyone kind of accepts that at work, and it's fine. But going back to school, like, yeah, I would try and like blend in the classroom and not do anything, but then it would feel like you've got all that inbuilt energy, and actually like you want that kind of sensory input, which can just be regulating.
Yeah, thank you. I've just looked at the time and I cannot believe it, but I think we are going to have to wrap up. It's gone so quickly and I have so much more that I could talk about. But yeah, we will unfortunately have to wrap up. So thank you so much, everyone, for all of your amazing questions. And of course, thank you, Emily. This has been such an insightful chat. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm always much better at writing down my thoughts than verbalizing them out loud. But yeah, it's been so lovely to chat, and thank you for all the questions and comments and things.
Yeah, thank you. I would disagree. I think you've been amazing at answering all of these questions. But yeah, thank you so much. And it's been great to see you all. So have a good day wherever you are. And take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.